Ladies and gentlemen, I'm just waiting for them to allow us to start because it will be recorded. Actually one of our most brilliant students.
Oh, wow.
Do you remember? She was the one who posed the question to Ambassador Shukla.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, I said that I should get this girl. I called her to my office, and we decided that her diploma thesis would be on BRICS.
Wonderful. Great.
And
good choice.
And if she will, I don't know where she will enter the university for her master's and her PhD, but I guess that Ambassador Shukla can give her coordinate.
You read much about South Africa. Do you read a lot about South Africa? You read a lot on the development sector. So the basic fight is from the tax authority. They put a new commissioner of revenue. And for me, it expresses something. Why issue tenders for buildings and so to steal when you can steal at source? But you control the revenue service. And 4 of us were placed in revenue service until 2012, and we left it to professionals. The president has put his own person. So we have to stand up, and that was partly the choice for this job. The same will happen in Kazakhstan if it's not monitored well. So as Nazarbayev goes, people will want to control the tax authority. And it's a very powerful institution. In America, John DeLucia was brought down by the tax authority, not through any other law.
Just how any day now with the new tax law.
Really?
Just now that is legal.
4 of us from the ANC were deployed. Our current Minister of Finance, Ivan Pillay, and myself.
Is it true the clever money was the absolute one of the greatest?
Yeah. So that's the pedigree I come from, the second generation of change managers, the visionaries. So I want to retire. This is a mission. Please take this time. But I understand that business fully. We changed that here. Hello.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to announce today the opening of the Winter School at the Faculty of International Relations, Eurasian National University. The Winter School will be co-organized and held on the G Global platform. And today, our very first speaker is Ambassador Shrish Manalal Soni, who is one of the dearest friends of Eurasian National University. And if you will remember, in September, he was the one who actually initiated the visit by Ila Gandhi, granddaughter of great Mahatma Gandhi. And then, by the initiative given by His Excellency and Madam Gandhi, the 2nd of October, we celebrated International Nonviolence Day at our university. The event was celebrated beautifully with our girls wearing saris, our students who expressed their views on how do they understand Mahatma Gandhi and non-violence, and with honorable guests, among them Vatican presented a speaker. Among them, people of different denominations were speaking, which was a great event. His Excellency Ambassador Soni did not come to the diplomacy as a career diplomat, but he both acted as a businessman and as a person from academia. And you know that it is not possible to understand international relations in its full extent without understanding what the economy, the moving power of the diplomacy is. Your Excellency, and today I asked another dearest friend, Dr. Professor Victor Schöböck. He came from Colombia to act as discussant at His Excellency's lecture.
Thank you very much. For me, it feels like returning home. So, thank you. Firstly, I want to congratulate the Republic of Kazakhstan, the government of Kazakhstan, and all the people in Kazakhstan for your 25th year of independence. It's a big hallmark. And as the Republic of Kazakhstan, you have achieved a lot. There were many discussions on how far did Kazakhstan move from the first year to 25 years. The second thing is congratulations on being appointed as a non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. It's a big responsibility. It's the first time a country from Central Asia will be participating. And mostly when countries participate for the first time, it puts a lot of pressure on the foreign ministry, but they grow out of it as a much stronger foreign ministry. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs during this 12 months into 2017. Thirdly, I wish you all the best for Expo. Expo 2017 is going to be enlightening and educational for every citizen of Kazakhstan. And of course, the way the government of Kazakhstan has marketed it, I've been to even schools where children are busy discussing Expo, drawing about Expo. So the marketing side, I think every citizen in Kazakhstan has some knowledge of this big event. And again, it's going to be one of the biggest, largest events in Central Asia, drawing many people to your country. But during the Expo, the Astana International Financial Center will be opened. There are some negotiations going on currently. The development of the legislation is in process. The procedures will be all drawn up and the practices would be established during Expo. So companies would start to sign up, and from the 1st of January 2018, Expo will be more than operational. Now, how many of you know that Expo is opening soon? The Financial Intelligence Center will be opening soon. Any of you have been tracking what is developing in there, or you don't know anything about it? No. Does anyone know in detail or some level of no? Okay. Now let me tell you why I'm doing this and why I chose this as a thesis. Firstly, I'll be retiring in a few years. So most people feel, well, that's it. I don't have to study more. But the slide will show you what Aristotle said about education. Go back, please. Yeah. So in any area, one of Aristotle's famous quotations or phrases was, what is the telos? So the telos is, where is this compass pointing to? And when I decided whether I should study further or not study further, I had to ask myself, what is this telos? Why am I doing it? What's the purpose? And for me, I leave Kazakhstan in 6 days. 6 days I leave. My term ends. I've been here for 5 years. I've enjoyed every moment, not every day, every moment. So I wanted to present this as a gift to the people of Kazakhstan. And the topic is Astana International Financial Center, a practitioner's handbook to international tax. So it could, as more people shape it, and I will be happy to collaborate with everyone, I think it could be a very good textbook to teach international tax and prepare people for the Astana International Financial Center. Somehow the targets are around attracting 3,000 people to work in that space. I have no doubt that it would succeed. The second point is something you would never have heard about. It is an act of law that was in my country called the Bantu Education Act of 1953. Now, I see that Kazakhstan is rating highly in the top 10 in studies on science and technology. But this law made it legal that black people in my country, indigenous people, 95–96% of the population, should not learn science and mathematics. Can you imagine a crazy world where a law says this group of people who are the majority of the country should not be learning mathematics and science? So that's a condition of our population as they generate. And it's a difficult law which dropped our potential as human beings to perform to the fullest of our own potential, was wiped out by this legislation and many more. Now, in 1976, the apartheid regime wanted to teach us geography, mathematics, science in Afrikaans. Imagine someone coming here and saying your children must learn in Hindi and no other language. So they were planning to make people at best only be gardeners. You know, in our labor law, we were prohibited, African people, from holding a tool. So if you're in a construction site, you could not hold a leveler. You could only push the wheelbarrow or do the hard labor work. 95% of the population, for 5% of a colonial or foreign, they called it white grouping, which was mainly European, could do everything else. Next slide, please. This is a photograph of Hector Peterson, who was a young boy. In 1976, the students said, enough is enough, and we will fight till we die. I'm one of those brigaders. I was in university at 1976, and we led the strikes across the country, but mainly in my university. I pulled most of this, we had 100% strike. So the police retaliated. We had no guns. We just walked out peacefully on strike. We had no guns. All we could pick up was a stone. Retaliated with arms. And Hector Peterson was the first student who was killed. Of course, that led to a whole new young generation of people going into exile and wanting to fight for the freedom of a country. Go ahead. The Freedom Charter was formed long before 1976. And this was done by a congress of people who came together, black, white, Indian, colored, all denominations, all religious groupings, who said, this is our dream for our country, South Africa. And our constitution is based on the Freedom Charter. Most of our legislation reflect the Freedom Charter is there upon which we built a Bill of Rights and a constitution. But if we have difficulties, we always reverse to the Freedom Charter, which was built, written up in 1953. Right? Now, let's see whether we're on the right direction. This is what Mahatma Gandhi said about learning. Live as if you were to die tomorrow. Learn as if you were to live forever. So that forced me. And every few years, I go back to a university and I try to improve my qualifications. By the way, in 1976, I was told that I should either pay back my bursary or I should not bring politics into the university. I chose to resign and join the working class. I went to start as a laborer for a shop, and from there I went into business and so forth. So, and I studied part-time. Again, as I got deeper into the struggle, there was one course outstanding which I didn't do. So I always felt that I'm not a qualified person. Of course, after that, I got many, many qualifications, but it sets you back in life. And therefore, for every person in this world today, every youth, they should know it's absolutely important to study, and for every grown-up to continue studying. That's my take on the issue. Come back, go ahead. This is what Martin Luther said. The function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. Intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education. Go ahead. This is what Nelson Mandela said. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And this is what your president says. The goal is to improve the competitiveness of education, human capacity development by providing quality education for sustainable economic growth. Now, you know, it didn't take me long. I came to Kazakhstan in a day or two. I coined the following phrase, and many people use it. Others say it's wrong. I said, President Nursultan Nazarbayev is following on the footsteps of Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, and Nelson Mandela. I'm convinced, like we look back, and this is 3 years, December 5th, that we lost Nelson Mandela, that we really recognize, hey, South Africans, you had one of the greatest person of this century living on this planet. The people in India recognized that much later. People in America recognized it much later. So it doesn't matter which religion you come from, which denomination you come from, which city, but everyone recognizes that Martin Luther King brought values to our country. Mahatma Gandhi did the same, and not only to those countries, to the entire world. Go ahead. Now, coming back to this hard issue, I know it's a boring and a difficult dissertation, but it's important for every Kazakh citizen, particularly if you're living in Astana. Firstly, the opportunity will be there to teach international tax and train international tax, train people in it. Going on, it's going to create jobs by international companies. So people from Kazakhstan would be given much better opportunities. And if these global firms come in, you will find that you can migrate to another center in the world working for an international company. But you may start here. And this is going to become a very important subject matter in the next few years. If not, mainly people from across the outside would come in. This financial center offers two basic things. It says if you are located there, you would not pay tax for 50 years, companies. And if you're a foreign worker working in that area, inside the financial center, you will not pay tax. So how much tax do you pay as an Indian citizen working here? What's the percentage tax? 10%. So that's not a big gain. And what is the company tax in Kazakhstan? You don't know? No. Okay. In any event, in some countries, mainly in my country, it can go up to 42%. Yeah? And our foreign minister in his last midterm budget speech said that we will not tax the poor anymore, but we will tax companies. But in some companies, like mainly in the Nordic countries, your tax could be as high as 65, 70%. So, and there are conditions and clauses in the international world with the OECD. They will say that these things are acceptable, not acceptable in tax. But countries legislate anyway. Now, the most exciting thing is that the owner of Alibaba, you'll know Alibaba, the online store, he came to the Astana Economic Forum this year. And there was a panel discussion on the Astana Financial Center, International Financial Center. And just 2 weeks ago, President Nazarbayev, or a few weeks, he was in China, and he invited him to come here. Now, imagine you saying, I come from Kazakhstan. You know where the headquarters of Alibaba is. So many people in the world go online shopping, but they could locate here, not paying tax for 50 years, and bring the entire senior management who won't pay tax for 50 years. So it's a big attraction point. And the knock-on effect of that is that if you take larger American universities, they locate around these tax benefits, and they also locate around places where universities are, so they can bring in talent into their companies. But they could also open innovation centers and entrepreneurship centers, which can build businesses. So if it's not going to be you, it's going to be your children or your children's children who can benefit out of this. Most people ask, will it succeed? My answer to that is yes. A certain yes. It may not compete with the Abu Dhabi Financial Center, because the non-tax benefit is not unique. It exists in every country in the world. So France has certain areas where for certain things that you do, you won't pay tax. Netherlands has the same. For example, if you in Netherlands, anything to do with trademarks and patents, movie making and so forth, they have certain categories which they're willing to give away. And mostly you look at areas that have not developed in your country. So Kazakhstan, the legislation has been promulgated. It's signed by the president some time ago, and it identifies the areas, which sectors can go into the financial center. For example, finance, in particular focus to Islamic finance. It's not big here. You collect no tax from them. So you're putting naught to get something. It's a good game, right? Some high-end technology companies would be accepted, and so forth. So the intention is to, in the next 50 years, in the 50-year plan and 100 concrete steps which Kazakhstan is following, to be part of the top 30 developed countries in the world, that these sectors will be well established, and many of the world leading companies would be headquartered here. That's the benefit. There will be trade-offs. There will be huge fights. Can you tell me one area where you think there will be a problem? What comes up for you? Well, as a citizen of Kazakhstan, would you be happy that someone coming from outside doesn't pay tax and you have to pay tax? Or if your friend got a job there and you pay tax, and let's say the individual tax increases over time. So everyone would want to be in an area where there is no tax. You benefit more in your cash takeout. So these are little complexities which will come up. Or if a person from Kyrgyzstan who has a foreign passport works there, doesn't pay tax. You're a Kazakh, you pay tax. Which sectors will be allowed? Now, the mining sector for currently is not allowed to be inside the Astana International Financial Center, because your government collects a fair amount of revenue from the mining sector. You can't wake up one morning and say, from our source of income, from all these items where we pay tax, put it into the financial center and you don't pay tax. So these are some of the critical issues that would come up. Yes, please.
That special economic zone and financial center, there is any similarity between that kind of zones?
Yeah. Well, the economic zones encourage certain types of industries to be built in Kazakhstan, right? So they may give you a rental allowance. They may give you a subsidy for your capital. and so forth. And largely that can be made more attractive or dropped. And that happens in every part of the world. Yeah, it could be on the quick, fast reduction. Let's say you buy machinery and you're supposed to depreciate it over 5 years. So your machinery could be depreciated on purchase. Those are the common things that people use around the world. So you already go into a non-tax payment zone from the beginning, not as you earn and then you deduct. In some instances, if you did not make profit, you would pay, you can depreciate your equipment and so forth, but you will not be able to support your cash flow. Whereas in the instant, you're already not making a high tax, but if you're just about breaking even or making a little bit of profit, you'll still be due to pay your tax. Whereas if you can write off earlier, so some around the world will make it 3 years instead of 5, some will say in the first year upon purchase. So you use your tax liability. It's brought forward and it strengthens your cash flow. Any other questions? Okay. Now, in the world of international tax, so what I largely cover in what I've put together, and I chose the director of this thesis very carefully. He's been, it's Professor Barry Spitz, who owns the South African Institute of Tax. But he's also been a professor at a university in Paris and the University of Texas. And he's helped many governments build financial centers. So he understands this world well. Now, the first issue on tax is it's changing very fast. So computerization of tax, you guys have moved in that direction. E-filing, you can file your tax returns electronically. So computers make things very easy. Now let's use and stick to the example of Alibaba. Let's say Alibaba sells $1 billion in one day. And through all that, they VAT or GST, whatever countries are using, is 10%. And the profit of that is X amount. In whichever country they locate, they will have to pay that. If they locate to Astana, that goes into net profit. So that's the real benefit for big companies, global companies to come in. And they will be making choices. It may not be Kazakhstan because another country offers it. Yeah? And in the tax world, the slide in front will show you, there's always a balance between service and compliance. So many people, like when you go for a visa, they say, no, not possible. So the service rating will be 0 because they're compliant. Now, in the tax world, you need to understand that a taxpayer is paying your salary and paying your government salary. Largely, the revenues will come from there. So how will the Astana Economic Financial Center balance service and compliance? There are many things that people who enter there will have to comply with that will impact on international tax law. Next slide. Next slide. There's an ongoing discussion in the world about tax evasion and tax avoidance. So the World Bank, the IMF, will speak a lot about evasion. Evasion is a purposeful calculation or purposeful intent of just not paying tax. So I avoid it. I don't file my returns. I don't register as a taxpayer. I don't pay the money that I declare, or I don't fill in a declaration. Or if I fill in a declaration, it's incorrect. I'm earning much more. They speak around that people should be honest. Now, one of the leading discussions in the US presidential campaign was that Hillary Clinton was accusing Donald Trump of avoidance. Avoidance is legal. Yeah? So if Donald Trump moves his businesses to here, for 50 years, he won't pay tax as an individual, so long as he can provide that certain requirements are in international law are achieved. And he proudly said, look here, I'm an intelligent man because I know how to avoid tax. Now, the IMF and World Bank have not said that that is wrong. And the largest amount of wealth in the world sits in countries where there are centers like this, where the richest of rich avoid paying tax. Therefore, you and I foot the bill. Yeah? It's like the very rich man walking out of the restaurant just before the waiter brings the check, if you can see it like that. So there will be, in my view, some movement towards the tax planning and avoidance. And OECD is starting to put the line on. But Kazakhstan will have to take that into account and meet those requirements if they want to measure up against the world to be rated as a top 30 country. The second is integrity and entrepreneurship. So you got to allow a balance. So if I take in my office, most people phone me and say, Ambassador, can I do this? And I know it's not compliant fully to the law. Let me give you a simple example. One of our rules are you must come and show your face. And the lady looks at you and says, okay, that is so-and-so. She says, I saw you, therefore you must come to the country. You must come to our office before we consider giving you a visa. Now, what if Minister Idrisov is going? I've seen his face in the newspaper so many times. I can Google him on a website. I've met him. I meet him virtually once a month or maybe more. Does he have to come there and show his face to Olesia to comply? So there must be a spirit of entrepreneurship and integrity. Integrity must be upheld, but at the same time, if you're not enterprising, nobody will want to be with you or work with you. So that balance is something that needs to come in, not only in the financial center, in universities, wherever. Next. Okay, so I'm not going to go into the great detail, but these are all the topics that I covered. Come back to that first slide, Olisa, please, just on the chapters. Yeah, okay. So the first point that I make, or the first chapter, is what is changing in the world. It's very easy for you, if you marry a South African and so forth, to go and live in South Africa and become a South African. So in the early days, everyone said, I want to go to America and I want an American citizenship. We had an enlightening discussion. He moved from being an American to South. He lives now in the southern part of the world. So the world is changing rapidly. I was surprised when I was in Cape Town. I received an email, Ambassador, will you attend my wedding? It was a Kazakh lady. And I thought, but I mean, so she said, by the way, it's in Cape Town. It's just near your residence. And the person has located there. So things change so fast. Computers is changing the world. Trade agreements is changing the world. There's so many things happening on this planet that just make the management of tax. The tax management has to be fast and respond to what's happening. The second one is compliance. People find many routes not to comply, and they can do this legally. So you may find Kazakh companies who are large taxpayers reorganize themselves and move in a financial center, and there'll always be disputes about whether this is acceptable or not. So it's the gray line. It's not really wrong, or it's not really right. And the Astana Financial Center will be built on English law. So English law will be used with the practice of the Dubai Financial Center, on the model of the Dubai Financial Center. So there's no experience in this. In my view, it's going to be very successful because all Russian, Kyrgyz, Tajik, Turkmen money, which is in Switzerland, could very easily come here and be used in businesses and loans in the region. And I think many see that as the initial market. For Russians, it'll be easy to invest in Europe or for Europeans to co-invest with them. So all partnerships could be brought in line. So there are many other things that happen in international relations, and so which this will be attractive to work around. Then I speak on the structures of international tax and offshore financial centers. So generally what happens in different countries, and we should not be fooled, it's not the first in the world. So when you're not the only, you have to compete. And your graduates will have to come out sharper to get jobs here. If not, it will go to international citizens. They've also agreed that on a visa for foreigners, it will be granted at the airport immediately and so forth. For families and people working in, there'll be a relaxation of the visa regime. So students at this university, if they're positioning to work there, will have to be far more focused on understanding the competition and stepping up to beat that competition. Offshore operations and transactions. So I show what are the general legal rules when you do offshore transactions. So I cannot be living in South Africa, just coming here for the number of days and claiming that that product are not taxable because my head office is here. There are rules of engagement, various detailed rules in WTO, which Kazakhstan has joined, in terms of which country is this product manufactured in, which country is this person a resident of. And you will have, they call it tax agreements, where you agree that if you pay your tax in South Africa, you don't pay in Kazakhstan. So all of these agreements on taxation will be looked at with a microscope now. Of course, for this university, I will recommend that you'll begin to prepare a database of all the legislation, the rules, and so forth. But any dispute will be settled by English law and international judges. So as those rulings come through, the people who understand the way the general rules are being applied and the outcomes will be the best pick to be employed. And outside of that, there's a huge business in accounting, in legal representation, in HR support services, a whole range. So people should be trained that they don't break the law and get the high-level jobs as the center opens and starts to attract more companies. So in many areas, and you need this database to compare with what is offered around the world and what is changing around the world. So if France says, okay, because the Kazakh financial center accepted this, we also accept it. So you're no more in an advantageous position. You've got to keep on upping the game. Tax treaties and double taxation, I've spoken about that. Many countries sign a double taxation treaty. If you pay your tax in one country, if you have an agreement, you just produce that to the tax agency in the other country and you're not liable twice. But if you don't have double tax treaties, you'll have a problem. So I started reading on the different tax treaties that Kazakhstan has, and so that will be a very interesting area for you to follow up on. And then when people come here and say, look, I want to compare this, you can't just sell this as the best product if you're a consultant. You have to compare it with offshore offerings, but also how you will structure that company so that inside the financial center, so it doesn't go in breach of any other rulings or any other legislation. And that's where I see the second big fight coming up in Kazakhstan. The head of the tax authority and the head of the financial center have to be extremely well aligned. Because every time they add a sector, the head of the tax authority has to know and agree that you're going to lose this amount of money in tax. And that can become a dividing line. Of course, all companies, property owners, shopping center owners, they all want to go in there and say, look, we will now build more. But there has to be a cutoff. If not, your tax base will be evaporated. But the advantage for Kazakhstan is much of the national companies, most of the wealth is still in the national companies. So you're following this discussion on privatization, strengthening the stock exchange, and the stock exchange will be inside the financial center. So many objects owned by state will be sold, and which ones qualify, which ones don't. That is what people will have their eye out on. Trust. Normally people form family trusts so they avoid paying tax when they die, and they avoid the complications of transferring property and things. So how will you create your own trust? How will you advise your friends, families to create their trust, and how can you get these benefits? And sometimes it may rule in or out. So this is a new game. Now I can see from the look on all your faces, this thing is going to happen in a year and a half. Y'all are the custodians of education. And that's the blank, that's the divide. So that's the gift I'm leaving behind when I leave in 5 days. The total dissertation, Alessia will send it to you. You can circulate it and have a look at it. But these are the core things. From 2018, there's no more Expo. You finished with serving on the Security Council. The flag of Kazakhstan is only going to go higher on the pole based on the financial center. I haven't seen anything else that's going to take you forward in that dynamic form. So it's a big project, and people are still in that space of saying, will it work? It is going to work. And I have confidence in the government of Kazakhstan. Kalam Petov, who's heading this project as the commissioner of the Astana International Financial Center, is a very sharp person. And there's enough in, because the state-owned objects that are privatized or go in a partnership will come into the financial center. So you've got to prepare yourselves for this. And against that, of course, the world economy and country economies go up and down. So you need to watch that weather forecast to stay out of the storm. So these are the key. And I also speak about intergroup transfers. You can't be Mercedes-Benz selling products to Brazil and generating the invoice from Astana Financial Center and not paying any tax on the profit. These will be brought out by international tax law. The one would definitely be, which citizen do you, which country are you a citizen of? And the way they use that is your working permits and the number of days that you spend in that country. So you'll find many people buying the apartments there and just staying there for 60 days. They'll come in summer, and they will not be obliged to pay tax. They can continue to. So that again has a knockoff on your transport hubs. It has a knock-on on your airlines, your interconnectivity in the country. I'm sure because of that, a lot of airline concessions will be made. So far, Air Astana is largely flying most flights in and out of Astana Airport. Once the airport is enlarged, more flight approvals will be granted, and you'll see many direct flights. Whether that brings down the price of flights or not, I don't know. But the flights in and out of Kazakhstan are relatively expensive in international rates. So you're going to go through, in the next 2 years, is going to be extremely volatile with a lot of change. And I thought that I should write this. It's about 200 pages by now, just for people in Astana as a gift before I leave in the next 6 days. And anyway, through Akbota, any of you who needs to read it.
We're getting it published.
Ah, okay. Yeah. Well, that was what the university was intending to do, and I'll welcome that. I didn't do it as I started off to make a book, to sell, or anything. It was simply to say to people like you, thank you for having my wife and I in Kazakhstan for 5 years. We enjoyed our stay, and we will be interested in supporting any endeavors for many people to see the opportunities within the Astana International Financial Center. Prepare yourselves for it, and by email or whatever, I'll be in contact with the university to help as best we can. So thank you.
And I would say that it is actually a very generous present by His Excellency, who is as well an honorable professor of our university, and we will make the ceremony on Monday. And I guess there would be some remarks from our colleagues, because today, as I explained to His Excellency, most of the people presented at the lectures are not actually students. They are our colleagues. They are the professors of 4 departments of the faculty: Department of International Relations, Department of Regional Studies, Department of Western Studies, and Department of Turkic Studies.
My name is Andrei Shenin. I'm an associate professor here. And first of all, I'd like to say thank you for your presentation or address for a lecture. I got 2 brief questions. First of all, could you please say a couple of words about other attractive positions for foreign investors, like, no, except tax waiving or visas issues, like infrastructure or high demand from Kazakhstan population? And the second question is there any influence of WTO rules on Kazakhstan tax policy? Thank you.
In price of stocks, stock exchange companies, and so you have that, right? And I think your government is fully aware. Infrastructure is a second. People want to locate to a reasonably priced wise and a good location. They will be getting the brand new facilities right out of the expo. So all those ring-fenced properties will be made available. And Kazakhstan has said that just be a small fee. So if you buy a property and so forth, you have the local government rates and taxes, and so that won't apply. So I think as far as what is changing in the world and what is required, that location more than provides a better facility than required. So that is okay. In terms of the comments, not by WTO only, but you have a World Customs Organization, which I was the deputy chair of the enforcement committee on for 1.5 years. They could see things that are not being followed in terms of international agreements and international law. The OECD will raise red flags and things. But I'm confident that your government has taken all of that into account, and that's not going to be a problem. And that's why I'm saying that academic students, professionals, even companies like Ernst & Young or Deloitte & Touche, KPMG, they haven't got a critical mass inside the company because they still think, okay, we know general tax and this is 18 months away. But the time is now to start developing the competence and capability so that people in Kazakhstan respond to those questions dynamically. And this happens transactionally on a day-to-day basis. Some companies may open here, but also take on Kazakh people because they don't know the language, the culture, and so there will be a blend. And if you all start preparing a group of students, I'm just planting the seeds, but you can invite people from Astana Financial Center to give focused lectures on certain areas. It'll help. And these people who focus on that will certainly be selected into that center very quickly. So I don't see any conflict yet. If not, they wouldn't have accepted them. But it's what could happen in terms of these 9 areas that I point out in my thesis.
Remember that girl that I presented at the very beginning of our lecture?
Thank you a lot for the great and interesting lecture. Thank you a lot. It was really interesting for me because to see Astana as an international financial center. And my question would be about what extent would you exactly give so there would be built such kind of center? And maybe you think Expo 2017, the end of Expo 2017 would be the beginning of it, as for example, it will be opened as an financial center. So, or maybe as, if I didn't miss here, you said it's 2 years. After 2 years, it would begin. And it's really interesting for me because I would like our students, our citizens to work as economists, as experts, as specialists in this economic financial center, not other foreigners, of course. So in order to be competitive, in order to be as such intelligent, to be able to work in this center, what do you advise to students? Or maybe we have to make some more qualifications in our universities, or maybe students have to take some more experience about law, international law, about economics, about competition and other issues. What would you like? What would you give as advice? Thank you.
It's 6 to 12 months away. During the expo, they will have a special session to launch. Because remember, in many of these heads of states are attending expo. The Shanghai Cooperation meeting of heads of states will happen during that period. So it will be the perfect time to say we're ready and open for business. So the contracts are already started to be discussed, and which companies will be selected and so forth. Parallel process, the privatization program is going on. And there's a view on how to strengthen the stock exchange. So from 1st January 2018, it's operational. Otherwise, those buildings stay empty. So the time is earlier. And yes, your question is correct, and it applies to everyone sitting in this room, because regional will change. As I said, Russian investors, Kyrgyz, Turkmen, many of them who are afraid of how the governments run the economies, locate their money outside, and it's impossible for that money to be used to grow their own countries and the region. That'll change. Because if enough guarantees are given in the Astana International Financial Center, it's much more comfortable to bring your money here than to leave it at zero interest in another country. And the opportunities are going to open, so people will need their money. And I'm sure that there'll be a tax amnesty granted, in Kazakhstan at least, for all people who have money abroad. If they bring it in, they'll pay some small amount and be able to use it. So it will have another knock-on effect. It will strengthen the tenge. And remember, Kalimbitov was the Reserve Bank head when they stopped pegging it, because it was costing Kazakhstan a lot of money. Your question, yes, we must. In fact, the opportunity is so open to open a center for taxation within a university. And you see, something else will happen. People will want local Kazakh citizens to work because they would need to set up. But also the local Kazakh citizens will gain the knowledge that I've put out here and could get an opportunity to work abroad. So there's going to, in that class of people, it's very easy. You pack your bags and you travel and you work to wherever the world offers better opportunities. But I know many South African citizens who are working in financial tax centers across the world. Also interesting is in the studies that Kazakhstan looked at world ratings, in comparison, South Africa has a very good school of auditing. And that's something they're trying to attract from South Africa. So, yeah, I think each university should consider a pipeline of, as you said, sharp students to go into this opportunity. And how you shape that, again, Professor Barry Spitz and myself will be very happy to share some ideas. Your question, please.
Thank you very much. Actually, not so many questions, but a few comments. It was very interesting when Your Excellency, you asked people in the audience here how much they knew about it. There was a rather deafening silence. And it is interesting, as you told us, Botta, that you, as you have here, international relations, regional studies, Eastern studies, and I don't know to what an extent there is also an emphasis at the Eurasian University on business studies, because as you rightly said in your introduction, this is the lungs of international relations. And I think that otherwise it is all going to stay just a theory. We all know that it is money that moves everything. So that's the first sort of question, really more to you.
Actually, we're hoping that one day we will open international economy on our faculty. Then we will be fully have the right to be called a faculty of international relations. But
sure
this is for the future.
Yes, but I'm sure that Your Excellency, you would warmly endorse such a thing, because I think there is a sore necessity in this university for something like that. Now, a message to all of you, because Your Excellency, His Excellency made a remark at the beginning by congratulating you on the 25th anniversary of your independence. And I just think it is appropriate to say to what an extent you ought to be grateful for having actually got independence through peaceful ways, in a peaceful manner. Because I have been many times to South Africa, and it really was a sobering experience, particularly visiting the Robben Island, because you theoretically had a sovereign country. South Africa was a sovereign country during apartheid. But as you were alluding, about 95% of the people were completely dispossessed. And for all intents and purposes, they were not independent. You know, it was rather interesting thing of being colonized by a very small minority, and particularly being denied one of the fundamental rights, which is right to education. And in fact, it is interesting that South Africa was also, after the end of the First World War, to some extent a colonial power, because the League of Nations gave you what was then Southwestern Africa, now Namibia, that was administered to you, and also used to wage a proxy war in Angola. And I think it is all that, for that, so important to appreciate the unique privilege that you had in Kazakhstan to have actually in a very peaceful way evolved into an independent country. And then a third remark I wanted to make, of course, I completely agreed with what the great Mahatma Gandhi said, that we should live as we will die tomorrow, and learn as if you're going to live forever. And I think the import of education is absolutely extraordinary. And I certainly commend your own zeal at this stage of your career to actually want to do something new. I have to say that when I wanted to learn yet another language, a psychologist friend of mine told me that I would be better off doing a course in carpentry. I had to ask Aidar, who is helping me, to come yesterday and enable me with a very weak internet that I have, so that I can use on my Air Mac my iPhone, and I was not able to do that. So I think that my next course is going to be something in a practical field. But I think what you say is a great inspiration to everybody. And on you were making a comment on very practical issue about the trusts, and I just want to bring an example that we have under Colombian legislation from the country where I live, which is very interesting. The inheritance tax is absolutely crippling, as it is in many countries. And one way that how this can be completely legally avoided is basically setting up not a trust, but a company in which you can name your legal successor shareholder to 99%. And therefore, as a result of that, once you die, there will be basically no tax to be payable at all. So I also think that you are completely correct that there are many useful examples one can take from South Africa in Kazakhstan as a country sort of relatively new in this financial world. And I'm very heartened to hear that you are going to stay in the region in your new diplomatic capacity, and that therefore you will be able to continue your close liaison as a visiting professor, on which honorary professor, on which I warmly congratulate you. Visiting and honorary professor, on which I warmly congratulate you.
by the chair of the International Relations Department.
So, Your Excellency, let me once again to express our gratitude for your kind cooperation and for your lecture today, as it is indeed very relevant and perspective theme as Astana's International Financial Center. And last year also was supervisor of one of graduates whose diploma thesis was dedicated also to Astana's International Financial Center, and she tried to investigate some international experience and how we may implicate it for Kazakhstani realities. And so today in our world we have a lot of different international financial centers, offshore centers. So how do you think how Astana in future may compete with all of these centers? Compete. Some maybe we have which competitive advantages maybe we should develop in order to compete with other centers. Thank you.
Firstly, it's focusing on the region. And that's why the head of regional studies will have to look at it closely as well. As I said, in Central Asia, Kazakhstan, if you look at international indicators, is far more stable on almost all global indexes. Now, most of the people who have made money in this 25 years after Soviet time, or people who had made money in Soviet time from Central Asian countries, don't keep it in their countries. This will afford them an opportunity to bring their money in an area where you are not going to pay tax. Let's look at your two big global partners who are neighbors, China and Russia. Again, they are obliged to pay high taxes. They'll be very happy to come in, like the head of Alibaba is seriously considering, and he gave the thumbs up during the World Economic Astana Economic Forum. Now, your president has followed up and invited him. I'm sure many of these companies will come. So the region knows Kazakhstan well. They know how dependable and reliable Kazakhstan has proven to be. They would come in. Look at the interventions politically with Iran, with Ukraine, that your president has led, with Afghanistan. So the EU will, all EU businesses trust Kazakhstan in this region, and that's a unique advantage for you. So if they want to move into serious business in this region, they will look at it. Now, of course, as I said, France has some, Netherlands has some. The sectors that Kazakhstan is focused on again is well thought out, and I'm sure they will add a few more as debates go on. But what they've chosen to put in the center, the sectors, are again very attractive. You have good, qualified people. Now, this is something, if you take in our country, if I tell you that this was a law, the skill of people you get in Kazakhstan is not bad. It's actually competitive. What is not correct in Kazakhstan is a level of productivity, a level of quality, because those concepts were never used during Soviet times. It was, if you were close to the Communist Party, you would move up. And I find it astonishing when I talk to people about productivity or quality. The general concepts are not ingrained in them. Entrepreneurship is one area. Kazakhstan will have to build strong enterprises. I'll give you a very simple example. I went to hire a cinema. So the cinema had 400 seats, and I was talking through an interpreter. So I said, how much does it go to a cinema? 1,500 tenge, right? In Mega or anywhere, around there, 2,000 maybe. I said, if I take all these 300 seats, how much discount will you give me? He said, sir, I'm so happy that you're taking them, 10,000 tenge each. Now, if you take demand and supply, you take any economic logic. I was shocked, and I said, maybe I heard wrong through the interview. And she was like getting annoyed, and she said, no, he wants 10,000. So I said, no, look, I know it's a VIP function, I know it's an embassy function. I don't want meals, I don't want wine, and it's not a party, I don't need any.
He says, no, let me tell you, if you do that, you have to use my supplier, and I'll give you my price, which is 10 times more than what it'll cost me. So I kept on struggling to understand the logic. And I said to my interpreter, it's fine, tell him we'll do the deal. I did it. You know why? He didn't understand entrepreneurship. He was of the view, if it's VVIP, you should pay more. And in Kazakhstan, the rich people will not go if that ticket was 2,000 tenge. It's a logic, it's a mindset, which is shifting very fast. On the positive side, I met 2 young entrepreneurs who went to Cyprus, had a meal in a restaurant. They found out that this is a South African franchise, flew to South Africa, secured the franchise, and they opened their first shop. It's opposite Rix's. It's called Ocean Basket. It provides you with seafood. And I met with them and the South Africans. They were clear. They're not going to make it in the oil industry. They're not going to make it in the mining industry. It's captured by the older generation. In this kind of business, they can display their talent and entrepreneurship. So what goes in the center, how it competes across the big game is going to be how enterprising and how fast can we build enterprising entrepreneurs. That's the first question I asked, madam, when we were walking up. Do you have a center for entrepreneurship? I told you I left university out of struggle, but I'm a normal human being. I wanted to marry someone. I wanted to live a normal life. And at best, I started work for $3 a day. $3 a day I started work. And when I got a job in like an international company as a computer capturing person, the computers used to be this big. And they wanted me, the apartheid law follows you throughout your life. They wanted me to go to the head office, which is in another province, but to travel by train with my new wife and my furniture. Whereas if a white comes, they get 3 months in a hotel and so forth. So I said, hey, this racism is going to follow me. And I left. And I remember very clearly when I was walking down the street, I said to my uncle, I left work. And he swore me, he was a professor in swear words. He abused me fully. He said, where will you get a job? How can you do this? The economy is on a downturn. I said, I'm going to be a business person. This was in 1979, 1980. In 1994, in Kobe City, Japan, I was awarded the top outstanding entrepreneur in the world. Now, you don't need unique people like me who show that we can go and capture any business and do well. You need a broad base of Kazakh students coming up in entrepreneurship and taking on, going into business, because your stated goal is to move 50% of your revenue generated from non-resource base, so not mining, not oil and gas, and through small businesses. And when I met with Senator Tokayev, he had studied my past, and so he said, will you do your PhD on small business? And I had to make a choice. The reason I chose taxation was, again, reflecting at my own country and identifying this line which brings the divide and can topple your government. If you study tax authorities around the world. You know, many of you, have you heard of a criminal called John Dillinger? He was #1 criminal in America. No police, no judge could ever take him to prison. He was put in prison by the tax authority. And most of the world's classical top-end criminals, the tax authority gets them. So, yeah. So you got enough to be very competitive. And these are the small things. So if you open a center for tax and a center for entrepreneurship, you're moving in a very powerful direction. And tax is not that big. You need, like you say, very strong, excellent people who go in there. And it's a game where you make a lot of money. If you know the advice, you know what to do, it's a good career. Yeah.
I have two questions based on reality. That there are 10 accountable special economic zones are running in Kazakhstan on all over the areas. One of the special economic zones is opened in Astana itself in 2001. There are 480 hectare land is over there. So my first question is that how this particular center is going to be different with that special economic zone, and you aware of that these things that now in the days the Kazakhstan is government is struggling with the labor law. It is not like that Jack Ma, Alibaba's owner, have to come and work here. There are some employee who he is going to employ here, and there are some labor is also going to work here. How that particular companies cope up with this labor market, where still Kazakhstan government have in conversation with this making new kind of labor market. Even UN interpreted it in that particular aspect of labor migration or labor kind of things. So how you find out these two important issues for that particular centers?
paperwork. Is the regime in place when the university?
Um,
And I guess it will be the
Can
last question.
Okay, Your Excellency, thank you for your very informative presentation. I'm an instructor here in the Department of Oriental Studies, and from your presentation, we are not an economists and let alone the tax specialists. I could grasp your major points. I could see that the Astana Financial Center it can offer tremendous benefits in terms of financial flows and movement of people, which in turn can boost tourism in Kazakhstan. But considering the low oil prices in the world, major task for Kazakhstan is to diversify its economy. So my question is, what can Astana Financial Center offer in terms of diversifying Kazakhstan's economy? Thank you.
You need to focus on manufacturing. You see that most World Bank articles and so forth cover SMEEs, right? So you don't need to build a micro enterprise. And in places like Africa, we've got thousands and thousands unemployed. Yes, to buy goods from one place, take it to another. But you relatively got a good rail infrastructure for movement of goods. And so you need to look at small to medium-sized manufacturing concerns. What would that give you? It will stop the import and the requirement for you to pay in USD or foreign currencies. Now, when our country gets a huge jump in Forex, foreign exchange rates. Last year it was 16 to the dollar. Now it's 13, and it goes to 15. None of us are bothered because what we need, 80%, is produced in the country. Same with India. So the rupee will go up and down. But our industrial sector contributes about 11 or 12% of the GDP. So that's the focus in training, building entrepreneurs to go into manufacturing. So your soaps, your detergents, your bed sheets, your bedspread, your pillowcase, your curtains can be made here. Tiles. When you look at all the construction going, most of the material is imported. And that's why these zones provide the incentive to go in there. I don't know if I'm answering you fully, but did you know in terms of Oriental study, they did a sample of Japanese DNA? Yes. And the study shows that they have a closer relationship to Kazakhstan. So there's some logic now that people went from Urals region to Japan. And I find that I succeeded, and my wife succeeded in our stay in Kazakhstan, because a lot of the cultural, that side of our life as people from the Oriental region, my grandfather came from, great-grandfather came from India to South Africa, her from Malaysia. I can click with Kazakhs immediately, but I see how the European ambassadors struggle, or how they make judgments or incorrect plans based on not knowing the culture. So that's, again, you're going to find a lot of the Turkish, a lot of the Chinese moving in. Iran could move into the financial center. But the Oriental study around that would be very important. We have a guy at our head office who keeps writing to me to tell me, did you learn enough about the migration of people in that region? Because he studies it extensively. He's an advisor to Anil Suklal on his documents and research. He heads his research unit. And his belief is that no matter what happens, that route, the Silk Route, unless you had some blood, no matter where you stay in other parts of the world, you're not going to identify the business opportunities correctly. And the biggest beneficiaries of the Silk Route will be people who had some DNA from the Oriental region. So these things can start, I think they're going to start coming together because the world was so closed during Soviet time. No one looked at these commonalities. And this 25 years, one of the developments has allowed each of these independent states to promote their culture and their religion and so forth. So, and it's just so natural, you know, if an Indian company opens here, they would look for someone who understands their society, and it works both ways. We created among ambassadors an Asia, Africa, and South America group, which we meet. We'll be meeting next week for lunch. We meet once a month and share our experiences. If you turn that group and look at it from another angle, it's everything other than America and Europe. You know,
We want to make it more easier than it will be said that you and I always things like that is the second one for us.
Mhm. Yeah.
And we are more comfortable, we are more accomplished with both people. For example,
And it's the study of people that really makes it painful for my wife Louida and I to leave. People say, but aren't you happy? It's a cold winter. It's the warmth of the people that we will miss, because that's what we grew up with in our homes, in our kitchens, and with our neighbors. It's a very deep DNA. So you need to focus on that part extensively. And in attracting foreigners, foreign investment is going to be a big thing. Now, the last point I want to make is President Nazarbayev made a proposal in one of his meetings that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs should be transformed. And people should look at Ministry of Finance and Foreign Trade or Foreign Investment. He's a wise person. He's not saying it for nothing. He's connecting these two blocks in order for the financial center and all the other things we're talking about to succeed, including the DNA, because you're going to start selecting who are your regional partners to solidly move the next 25 years forward with, who are your international partners. I don't know what's common between Italians and Kazakh, but Italy is still the largest foreign investor in Kazakhstan. European Union, if you club it, is higher. But the Chinese, the Indians are moving in very strongly. And India has the cash to come in with just like China. So those two will change things. At this BRICS, it was very evident. Normally you see Russia and China moving tighter, you know, on the key decisions, because they both got a seat on the UN Security Council. But this year, India moved much closer to Russia. Nobody could understand that inner dynamic. These are little things you and your students have to observe. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for a wonderful lecture, which was actually more like a discussion than a lecture. And I'm reminding our colleagues that we will meet again on Monday at 2 with the lecture, which would be performed by Dr. Professor Shebek. And the ceremony of giving the title of honorary professors for 3 professors. Dr. Anil Shuklal, who was here for BRICS, Professor Shrish Soni, and Professor Shebek. Thank you.